Yo, what's up? It's Coach E here from Precision Movement, and today we're going to talk about how to fix tight hip flexors. So the hip flexor muscles are in this area right here, and they work to do this action, hip flexion. So bringing the knee closer to the chest, okay? The muscles involved, the most important muscles involved in hip flexion are the iliopsoas, and those originate from the spine, the lumbar spine, and then insert down into the femur, and the rectus femoris, which inserts into originates from the pelvis and inserts down, right down into the knee. It's one of the quadriceps muscles. And a secondary hip flexor that's pretty important is the tensor fasciae latae. And that's just out to the side a little bit, right around here, and it goes from the pelvis into the iliotibial band, which then runs into the knee. Now, if you've got pain in the tensor fasciae latae, which is more on the side, then visit the video that I'm going to link to right now. You'll see the little card come up here on YouTube, and go watch that video. Because if you've got pain in the tensor fasciae latae, this video is not going to be as relevant to you. Okay, you might want to come back here afterwards. Now, if you do have tightness in the hip flexors, where it feels like after you get up from sitting, it's like, oh, you got to kind of straighten up and it's really tight and tense in here, then this is the video for you. So let's start off talking about why the hip flexors get tight in the first place. And I alluded to that already. The reason why is because of all the sitting that we do. Okay, we're in this crouch position, the hip flexors are shortened, and because we're supported, the hip flexors don't have to work, none of the muscles have to work, so the muscle is not only shortened, but it's weakened, okay? And that's a recipe for chronic tightness. When a muscle is short and it's weak and it atrophies because you don't use it, then that muscle will get tight because the brain thinks, okay, this muscle, if it's so weak, but I still need it to do stuff, at the very least, I'm just gonna make it tight so it won't just rip and pull apart and still provide some stability to the joint, okay? And in this case, especially with the iliopsoas, it's contributing to stability of the lumbar spine as well as the movement of hip flexion. It's a two-joint muscle. And stability of the lumbar spine is very, very important. If that lumbar spine isn't stable, then that's when disc problems, ligament issues can occur, you get low back pain. So the hip flexors, the iliopsoas, gets tight to contribute to that stability of the lumbar spine. So that's another reason why the hip flexors might be tight, and it's going to be addressed with one of the exercises that I'm going to teach you here today. So how are we going to go about loosening these tight hip flexors? Well, I talked about it in the intro. Static stretching is not the answer. Because if we're just going to go down and do your typical hip flexor stretch, trying to loosen these guys up, we're not addressing the one component, the strength component, okay? The muscle is weak, and a weak muscle, the brain likes to tighten it up. So unless we strengthen that muscle, the brain is never going to let it go. Okay, so we can do all the stretching, all the static stretching we want, and we're not going to build any strength. So we might get that length, but it's only going to be temporary. You're never going to get any lasting relief from the feeling of tightness. Okay, so we're going to both lengthen and strengthen. And we're not only going to strengthen the hip flexors in their motion, but also at their end ranges so that we can build that end range and achieve length and looseness for the long term. Okay, so let's start off. We're gonna do 3 exercises today, and then I've got some more info for you afterwards, but let's start with the 3 exercises. The first one is a dynamic mobility exercise. I call it the BJJ Quad Stretch. So if you've ever done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, then you'll know this movement is very familiar for you. So you're gonna start off sitting down. Let's start with your left hand on the ground. We're gonna do 8 reps per side. You place your right foot flat on the ground and you bridge yourself up. So my hips are off the ground, and then I'm just gonna drive my knee forward towards the ground like that, okay? And I'm gonna bring it back under control, switch, and I'm not gonna go fully with this side because I'm still rehabbing a meniscus injury I gave to myself in the summer, okay? So going side to side, breathing, going slow and under control. If you can touch the knee down to the ground, do it. And you can see you're getting a full stretch in the iliopsoas and in the rectus femoris as well, which is awesome because we're hitting the two major hip flexors. Okay, so 8 reps a side, back and forth, under control, breathing, and you're gonna dynamically lengthen the hip flexors, okay? Which is awesome, but it's not enough. We gotta do more. Next up, we're gonna do the half kneeling lunge stretch, and this is an ERE sequence, and it's a level 1 ERE sequence, okay? So ERE stands for end range expansion, and this is how we're increasing the length of the hip flexors. So you're gonna start off, get into the half kneeling position. So get kind of 90 degrees at the knees and the hips here. So you make like a box with your legs. And from here, you want to do a posterior pelvic tilt, okay? Otherwise, you're just gonna be straining your lumbar spine into extension. So posterior pelvic tilt, hold that. So keep the abdominals on, the glutes on a little bit. And then you're gonna drive your hips forward until you feel the stretch in the hip flexor, which is in the front, right in this area. Once you're there, hold it for a bit, get your alignment, breathe. And the first motion I want you to do is to try to scissor your legs together. So I'm trying to slide my knee forward, but it's not actually gonna move. And this is gonna engage the hip flexors, okay? So I do that, contract, hold it for one slow 360 breath. Expand the rib cage in all directions. And then gradually release. Okay, next, what you're gonna do is we're gonna spread the floor apart. Okay, so I'm gonna drive this foot forward and drive this knee forward. Nothing's gonna move, but that's gonna activate the opposing muscles, okay? So I'm gonna spread the floor, gradually increase the tension. And relax. And that's one cycle. Okay, let's do a cycle on the other side. So start off posterior pelvic tilt. Get the glutes on, and then you can drive forward. So this helps you to get the hip flexors and not strain the lumbar spine. From here, the first motion, first activation is to scissor to activate the hip flexors. So you gradually activate. Strong contraction, and once you're there, you hold that contraction with a slow 360 breath. And then gradually release, and then opposite, contract the glutes, try and drive the knee, slide the knee backwards, and hold it with a slow 360 breath. Okay, and that's one cycle on the other side. And I would perform 2 to 3 cycles on each side. Okay, you can do that on your own time. Finally, the third exercise. So we've worked dynamic mobility, we've worked strength at the end range at the lengthened, fully lengthened range of the hip flexors, the iliopsoas and the rectus femoris. Now we're gonna work strength at the shortened range. So we're building strength throughout that range of motion, which is going to allow the neuromuscular system to see, oh, we've got full control and strength throughout the range. We don't have to be so tight anymore. Okay? So with this technique, call it the front support hip flexion. It's very simple. You get in front support or like a push-up position. And all you want to do is you want to start off in good alignment. So nice, tall, long spine. Okay? And from here, you slowly flex the hip, keeping that alignment. Get to end range. And then we keep driving the knee up, activating the hip flexors through a slow 360 breath. So I'm keeping that activation on. I'm not just letting my knee hang out here. Then I slowly bring it back under control and switch sides. Keep activating the hip flexors. Squeezing those muscles, keeping alignment, and breathing. Place it back down under control. Okay, so that was 1 rep per I would do anywhere from 3 to 6 reps per side. Now, one thing that people might bump into during this exercise is the feeling of an impingement of the hip. Okay, now if that happens, a little tweak that you can do just to get more iliopsoas action and less impingement on that hip is to slightly abduct and externally rotate the hip. Okay, so basically, instead of going straight up, you go up and to the side a little bit. Okay, and that might help you get away from impingement of your hip. All right, so those are 3 exercises that are not your traditional hip flexor static stretching. Okay, and now that you've watched this video, you understand the mechanisms behind and the reasons why I've chosen these exercises as opposed to a typical static stretch. All right, so this routine, you could do this every day, totally cool, and that's just gonna get you faster results. Whenever we're trying to reprogram the neuromuscular system and do activation exercises, as opposed to like muscle building or max strength, then frequency will help us expedite the process and get results faster. Okay? Now, the hip flexors are just one muscle group, and like I alluded to before, there's lots of different compensatory mechanisms that could be contributing to hip flexor tightness. One of them is sitting. That's a habitual posture that we're in too much these days. Okay? Another one is back pain. If you've got back pain, that might cause other muscles to tighten up, such as the hip flexors. The TFL pain, if you've got that, that might be compensating for hip flexor weakness. Okay? If the iliopsoas isn't functioning properly or if it's weak, then another muscle group has to jump in and contribute to get the job done, to get whatever movements it is that you're after done. The TFL is a prime candidate. So like I said before, check out that video I have on TFL pain, which is gonna give you a little more on that specific topic. Now, if you're looking for movement longevity, you wanna keep doing the things that you love, then I invite you to check out the presentation that I've got a link for you at the end of this video and in the description, which is on the neglected muscle groups of the hip and how to train them to restore mobility and balance. Okay, with typical gym exercise like squats, lunges, deadlifts, we're working the quads, glutes, and hamstrings predominantly, and those muscles all get very strong. If that's most of what you're doing, then you're sure to have muscular imbalances of the hip that are going to lead to compensatory pain issues down the road. So if you like to train, you like to lift heavy, then definitely you need to check out this presentation. Or if you play sports and you want to keep doing those things now and for decades from now, then check it out as well. Okay, so that's all I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope to see you over at the presentation.